All right, taking a live look right now at the arrival of Air Force One at MCAS Miramar. It's been less than 20 minutes now, I think, since it's left LAX, and here it is already.
Yeah, they left about 6-7 minutes behind schedule, but they are easily able to make that time up in the air. It looks like they're probably going to land right about on time. They're expected to touch down at 11:50, which is 7 minutes from now. We have a crew on the ground there waiting for the president to arrive.
And we have been speaking with local political consultant Laura Fink about what the president's going to be doing here when he arrives. He has a whirlwind trip. He's only going to be on the ground a couple of hours before he has to fly on then to San Jose. So we've asked Laura to stick around and help us talk about this as he arrived. This whole trip has been whirlwind. He was in Arkansas, and then he was in LA last night to receive an award from the Shoah Foundation. How does a world leader keep up this kind of pace, Laura?
Well, let's keep in mind that he's had some experience doing it.
Sure.
And in addition to his whirlwind schedule, he has some things going on that he has to make decisions about and constantly weigh in on, whether you're talking about the situation in the Ukraine, the situation in Nigeria. This is someone who has to wear a lot of hats all at the same time.
Yeah, well, fortunately in Air Force One, you can communicate with just about anybody in the world, can't you?
That's right. You can believe he's doing some business right now. It's not all, cocktails and,
right.
and roll-up dinners.
Yeah, he's not kicking his feet up on the plane there. He's in communication with his staff and his aides. I want to ask you, you have a lot of experience with regard to campaign finance, fundraising. What goes into planning an event like this? How far in advance? When you're talking about a swing through California, but in particular coming here to San Diego, what does everyone have to take care of before the president can even come here?
Well, presidential visits, particularly sitting presidential visits, involve, as you know, a wide range of security. There are a number of Secret Service officers that live and breathe right here in San Diego, and when luminaries like the president come to town, they are activated and they do serve. I would imagine that he had a presidential advance team coming and vetting every single inch of the route that he would take, both the Jacobs home and any other venue that he will be entering while he's here. All of that work is done ahead of time, and these are folks that are incredibly vigilant, that make changes to their surroundings to make sure that the president is safe while he is here. So that would be the first layer. And in terms of preparing for the event, that is done a number of months in advance. Folks are invited, the word spreads, the venue is selected. I would imagine that either the president or Leader Pelosi made a personal call to Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs to ask for their support and for them to open their home. And then they worked on a date, obviously, together. So that's the sort of thing that happens. But when you have a president coming to town, people find out about it. We all found out about it, whether or not we're going to the event.
Now, you have been to the event before. In this case now with the president, will they ask all the guests to be there before he gets there so that there's no late arrivals, as it were?
I would imagine you usually have to be there well in advance of any presidential event, and your names have to be submitted beforehand for a security clearance. So all of that work has been done. There's sort of an old joke that you dress up and you wait forever and ever, and then the president finally arrives. And this will be no different. I would imagine the guests are all there now, patiently waiting for the president.
And we should point out that, as you can see, Air Force One has touched down at MCAS Miramar. Touchdown about 2 minutes ago, 11:44. You can see it's taxiing, and it's a process, though. It doesn't just stop, and the president doesn't just jump off the plane, right? There's all sorts of security and just making sure that everything is set before he deplanes.
And normally a lot of local dignitaries will be on hand as well, right, Laura?
Absolutely. We can do some local San Diego celebrity watching in just a moment. Folks that were invited, that are in town, that are able to attend. Everyone would love, obviously, to meet the president. So we'll see Mayor Faulkner there. We may see members of the city council, other local elected officials, maybe some community leaders that have been invited to be a part of that. I'm curious to see.
Now, is this a partisan situation? We know Mayor Faulkner, of course, is Republican, but as mayor of San, and by the way, he is there. He did arrive just a second ago in time for the touchdown. He'd been busy earlier, but this is bipartisan, this part of the greeting, right? We're not talking about predominantly Democrats invited to this part of it.
Not at all, not at all. And I think that you saw that. It's only partisan if people choose to make it partisan. You saw that with Governor Jan Brewer when President Obama went to Arizona. And that sort of thing is really a shame, because this is an opportunity for our elected officials to come together and to show cooperation. There's a lot that San Diego obviously needs at the federal level, needs to work out. And so Mayor Faulkner is our ambassador in this instance, as are other local leaders that will be there as well. So this is, I don't imagine you're going to see any partisan scrapping on the tarmac today.
Yeah, that would be something, wouldn't it?
Fun.
Let me ask you, when they're setting up a fundraiser like this, and we have heard word that there were people who actually had to be turned away, that they couldn't accommodate everyone who wanted to rub elbows with the president today. How do they decide that? I mean, obviously the more the better in terms of trying to raise money, but at some point it can get out of hand, right? Because people are paying to have somewhat of an intimate setting.
That's absolutely true, and there are obviously limitations in private homes as to how many people can come. I was not party to how they might have made that decision, but my guess would be it's often a first come, first served situation. So if you have not RSVP'd or sort of staked your claim, then you may be unable to come.
Now, the situation, we just saw a shot there of the crowd that's waiting, and many of those folks had their cameras out. I mean, that's the one time, if you're going to have your smartphone out and your camera out, that's when you want to have it. Right?
Absolutely.
You want to have it there. And folks are getting ready for that, and they're going to record every second of that. But, I mean, you know, if you look at the crowd, a lot of them are just dressed very casually, and a lot of Marines are there in uniform as well.
Yeah, taking pictures. And you made a good point earlier in this hour, Laura, when you mentioned that, you know, politics aside, for a lot of people, this is a sitting president. You don't get a lot of opportunity, Republican or Democrat or whatever party, you don't get a lot of opportunities to have a sitting president come to your city and also have lunch with that president. So some of these people are probably a little bit starstruck.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, and the president is a star. He is the leader of the free world. You can't really compete with that, whether you're a Hollywood star or a sports star. This is something entirely different, and so that does have an appeal. And you see, you know, the local servicemen that are there. I think we see Mayor Faulkner
right there, yeah,
as well. This is something that you know, everyone gets a little starstruck.
Now, considering this is a military base, we would expect General Busby and Colonel Farnham, the top general in San Diego and the colonel in charge of MCAS, respectively, to be the first out there to greet him. Is that traditionally, I think, what happens at military bases? Aren't the commanders the first ones out there? Because
Absolutely.
it is military, after all.
Absolutely, and the president is landing on military turf, so
Yeah.
they're there ready to greet him.
I want to ask you about the president in terms of his fundraising this term. You know, again, he doesn't need to do it for himself anymore because this is his second term. Have you noticed a pickup in terms of how much movement there's been from him for the Democratic Party in terms of getting ready for these elections?
I think that a lot of times campaign fundraising is built around natural timelines. We have an election coming up on June 3rd here in California. There's a primary deadline, and their campaign finance is built around those. So you see natural momentum when people start to pay attention to races, which is often as the election is approaching. Sure. So this is no different. And so we're starting to see that sort of primary momentum here, which will enable him to capture the attention of folks as they write their checks.
Now you see the portable gangways there as they're getting ready to pull up to the plane. They'll get the go-ahead from the Secret Service when it's time to do that. They have one for the front and one for the back because coming out the back of the plane will be the press corps and all the aides, and of course the president will come out of the front door himself and make the grand entrance, and we're staying on this so that we can see that moment when it does happen. Meanwhile, again, because it is Marine Corps Air Station, there is a big limit on the number of public who can even be around that area. I think at commercial airports you see them much more crowded around than you see in a military airport, certainly.
Yeah, and of course, we saw there it is. There's the shot there on the left. You can see Mayor Faulkner with the group that will first greet the president when he gets off the plane, the door opening there. But again, it's a process. We've covered this before when the president arrives somewhere in Air Force One, and it's not zippity quick. It takes a little bit of time to make sure everything's secure, everyone's in place before the president can actually come down those stairs.
Now, he has walked out to the aircraft there with the Marine officers there as the stairs were driven out. As you can see, as it pulls out there, you can see you get a better relationship of where he is. He's walked out closer to the plane, so he'll be right there. I remember watching as the president arrived at LAX yesterday. Mayor Garcetti up there was so excited, and he was talking all day long about how he got his picture taken with the president. Everybody loves it when they get to pose, and as you mentioned, it doesn't matter what party you're in, you get to pose with the president. That's a big plus, so they want to give everybody an opportunity to do that.
I want to talk a little bit, as we know, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, Laura, that the major security clearance that has to be taken care of before the president enters a room with you. So you've got all these people who paid money to have lunch with him. Way in advance, their names have to be submitted so that they can be cleared, so that we know it's okay for him to be there with you. Can you talk a little bit about that process, how invasive it is, and how much time?
Well, I know that you're testing my memory here, because the last time I did a presidential event with a sitting president was a number of years ago with President Clinton. But I think that it's a number of weeks in advance, so that the security officials can look into folks' backgrounds, check out anything that might be suspicious or a warning in some way, and they look into it. Frankly, I've never had anybody taken off a list in my experience. But they do need to take that extra precaution. You cannot be too careful in these situations.
I would think, knowing that you're going to be vetted that much, if you have anything in your past that you don't want to come out, you better not apply to go to one of these
That's
things.
absolutely right. You do check your privacy at the door a little bit when you want to meet with the president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right, as it should be. The security is the most important. You're still looking live now at the front entrance to Air Force One, as again we're waiting for President Obama to come out. He'll immediately go down the stairs, be greeted by the commanding general there, General Busby, and the commanding officer at MCAS Miramar, Colonel Farnham, as well as Mayor Faulkner and a couple of other dignitaries. Then jump in that limousine and be spirited west to La Jolla for, like, I can only imagine it's going to be a great spread.
Oh, yeah. They're going to spare no expense here, and it is Irwin Jacobs we're talking about.
Although, you know, you figure along the other things that he gets deprived of as president, probably sitting down to a good lunch is one of them. If he's going to be pressing the flesh with people who have paid $32,000, he's probably not going to get to sit and enjoy a meal.
And no. It's going to be like a wedding, you know, where you have guests and you have to greet everyone and you don't get to eat. But you know, this is part of what people do in the world of politics when you're trying to raise money to make sure that they're trying not to lose any seats, and they'd probably like to gain some for the Democrats. Just very quickly to let you know that Wheels Up 20 after 11, and really touchdown probably more at 11:44, but by about 11:46 the plane was coming around to come to a final stop.
There he is.
Very quick. There he is, President Obama stepping out and coming down the stairs. We've seen this many times, but it never gets old.
It could be anywhere, couldn't it, Lori?
little spring in his step there. He's happy to be here in San Diego.
Yep, that's General Busby, and then Colonel Farnham will be shaking his hand next, and then Mayor Faulkner right after that. So doing the protocol right there. Wouldn't you just love to hear what they're talking about? It could just be, you know, banal, you know,
right?
just, yeah, like, nice to be here. You got a beautiful place here. Thanks for having me. You know?
We should also let you know, and by now I think people are savvy to this, but the president is going to be getting in the motorcade. You saw there at the beginning, we saw a bit of it ready to go when Hannah Mullins was there covering this for us. And when they get moving down the road, everything gets shut down, folks. So hopefully you're not going to be anywhere near where the motorcade's going to be, because they want to make sure that, again, the president's safe, and it's going to tie up traffic in areas as they head west to La Jolla from MCAS.
Of course, 10 News has reporters all the way along the route, including at the Jacobs Mansion and right a mile down the hill, where demonstrators have been standing, protesters have been standing out there for hours, and the folks have been gathered down the street from the Jacobs Mansion for hours. Got to wonder what the Jacobs neighbors are thinking about all this. You know, you think, wow, it's quite a big to-do. Hopefully they're at the event.
Well, you think that because it is Irwin Jacobs over the years, they probably had some shindigs over there. I would think they're kind of
Well, Laura
used
Fink
to
was
it.
telling us that you've actually been to his mansion a couple times for similar fundraisers, just not including the president.
That's correct. And I will say this, the Jacobs are very considerate of their neighbors. They're aware that this sort of thing has impact. And in fact, at other events, they have really been really pointed out the time limit, so that they could make sure that folks were in and out at the respective times, so that the neighbors were inconvenienced as little as possible.
Maybe you could offer to send them down to the spa, you know, send them up to La Costa for a few hours so they won't be impacted by this.
I imagine Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs have a few tricks up their sleeve that way.
I imagine they do too. I imagine they do too. He's so congenial. I mean, rather than just get in the car and drive away, the man likes to walk over, I'm talking about President Obama here, and greet the folks who have been standing out there in the sun waiting for him. I mean, the Secret Service is probably going, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But look at him. You know, he's posing for, there's with Colonel Farnham. He's getting his picture taken. And he's just being so accommodating to all the folks.
And this is without having to worry about whether they're going to vote for him.
Exactly. Yeah, you made that very good point a minute ago. Yeah, he's not running for anything anymore. This is just the kind of man he is, and taking some time there.
Well, and there are you think about the few opportunities that a sitting president has to sort of, be a real person. And this is one where he's interacting, not with people as voters, as you mentioned, and not with just really as his constituents, as the people that he represents. And so I can imagine that this is a welcome break from some of the taxing duties that he has to accomplish on a daily basis.
Yeah. And, a lot of times, as I'm sure you've noticed over the years, that it depends on that particular president's own just natural personality. Some thrive, I think, in this environment. They truly enjoy meeting and talking to people. Others, they have so much on their mind, they may not appreciate doing this as much. So, and you see it in the way they handle themselves over the years, depending on who we're talking about.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think Nixon was one that was not a people person, and then you have on the opposite of the end of the spectrum, you have President Bill Clinton, who I think no one could compete with in terms of his willingness and wanting to have conversations with just about everybody. That's why he was always running behind. And Obama kind of shoots down the middle a little bit. I think he enjoys talking to people, but he's not flagrantly behind schedule.
Now, I'm being told the folks at Miramar say that the people you see there, even though some of them are not in uniform, the ones who are not are relatives, are families of the military who have been invited there for this opportunity. So it's a select group in the sense that these are folks whose families have a lot at stake in defending this country. And I think the president has been told that as well, and he's kind of showing his appreciation that way. He has always been highly appreciative of the military and goes out of his way to comment on their sacrifices and the family's sacrifices as well.
Well, that's just it. There have been so many situations just during his term and a half so far in office where the military has played such a crucial role in the U.S. in terms of our freedom, in terms of defense, in terms of so many things, rescue operations, and the sacrifices that our service members make and their families. And I think it's not lost on him that we have some service member families who are mixed into this crowd here. He wants to make sure that they are not forgotten.
But it's also a matter of this being really one of San Diego's chief professions. Our military strength is really notable, and so he recognizes that and realizes that. So it's only appropriate, it's probably logistically appropriate that he land at MCAS, but it's also appropriate to and speaks to San Diego's legacy of having a really strong military base and servicemen and women who not only have come here to serve but also stay here afterward.
Yeah.
Can you explain, you mentioned that every spring there is a fundraising effort here in San Diego. The president, whoever the president is at the time, they're not always here. But how do they decide in terms of where it's going to be held, sort of the logistics of the type of event they're going to hold? And when it's time for to invite the president, does Erwin Jacobs get on the phone and say, hey, President Obama, would you like to come out? We'd like to hold a fundraiser for the party. Or do they contact people who know that they would be amenable to that? In
the past, Leader Pelosi has placed those calls. I don't know who placed the call in this instance, but I know that the Jacobs and Leader Pelosi and the Jacobs and President Obama are close, and so I believe they probably got their first choice here. I'm just guessing.
Now, for those of you who are tuning in right now expecting to see the Chew, this is still 10 News coverage, live coverage of President Obama's visit to San Diego. Air Force One arrived at about 11:45 this morning, and since then the president has been greeting, as you see, the folks who have gathered at MCAS Miramar to welcome him. Among those, several military officials and families of the military, as well as local civic dignitaries, Mayor Faulkner being among them. And we're just watching now as the president gets ready to get into his motorcade and drive to the Erwin Jacobs mansion in La Jolla for this as much as $32,000 a plate luncheon. We are also here with a political consultant and expert and campaign fundraising expert, Laura Fink, who is sharing some of her expertise with us as well. So we encourage you to stay with us as we do this live coverage. We will, of course, go to the Chew as soon as the president is well on his way to La Jolla. Yeah, and we have a team of reporters covering his trip. It's a short one. He'll go to the luncheon from here, MCAS Miramar, spend some time there with the folks who paid to have lunch with the president, and he'll be out of there probably in
a couple of hours where he'll head back to MCAS Miramar, get on Air Force One, and then head north to the Bay Area to San Jose, where they've got a couple of fundraisers planned there.
Laura, campaign finance is your wheelhouse, if I may say that. Can you guess at all how much money he can raise at these kinds of events? I'm not asking specifically how much he's going to raise today at this event. How much can he raise at these whistle stops he's making up and down the coast?
It's quite a range. It depends on the size of the house and the ticket price.
Yeah.
But you can raise $1 million at an event, certainly. You can raise much less than that.
Is it just the money from the tickets to be at these things, or do they also make or do they solicit other contributions from the guests that they're with?
Well, all the rules are out the window in some ways with Citizens United and that decision and the advent of super PACs and such. But that's not always done under these umbrellas and at these events. I mean, I think they stick to the ticket price. Ideally, you want to know how much money you're going to make before anything happens. You want to know that number before everybody walks in the door. That's one of the common misconceptions about fundraising is that, people will get there and then we'll just see how much we make. A good fundraiser knows exactly how much money is coming in the door right up at the moment the event begins.
Wow.
And hopefully it's collected.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, that's just it, right? What do you really end up with at the end of the day? President waving, getting into the limo there as they get set to take the motorcade over to La Jolla, to the home of Qualcomm founder Irwin Jacobs, where that luncheon is going to take place. You mentioned earlier that typically your experience with the springtime Democratic fundraiser here in San Diego is about $1,000 a plate. This is $10,000 minimum with President Obama attending. Is that unusual, or would that be normal if you have an event with a sitting president?
That's, there are events where they charge much more than that, where they charge that maximum, and that is the only entry price to get in. So San Diegans might be experiencing something a little bit different. Although I think we can all agree that this is out of the range for most folks. And so it's sort of interesting to talk about most of the events that President Obama does. He'll often do non-fundraising events, but this one, I don't know how many folks are able to even write that check.
Yeah.
So it really is a sort of exclusive group of folks in the upper tier of income, which is interesting, especially because President Obama is a champion of working for an economy that works for everyone. So, but you see the difference. In order to do that, he's got to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point that you made. I appreciate that for you bringing that out. Now, they haven't told us what route he's going to take. There are two primary routes he could take to get to the Jacobs estate. One, of course, is to get on the 52, which becomes Ardith Road and drives right down into La Jolla. The other would be to stay on Miramar Road, which becomes La Jolla Village Drive and takes you into La Jolla that way. That's a surface street, but either way, you're going to disrupt traffic between here and there.
Yeah, we're learning here that there are a lot of people actually who are very curious about this, who may not be going to the luncheon, but they'd like to see the presidential motorcade go by, and people are already lining up in certain areas of La Jolla.
That's near the Jacobs home right
Yeah,
there.
That's separate from the protesters who we showed you earlier, but these are folks who just want to see, who just want to take pictures and say, hey, look, there's the president going in his motorcade. They tend not to like to publish exactly the route that he's taking for security reasons,
Exactly.
although, trust me, when you're out there and they're headed that way, you'll know.
Oh, yes. You'll know because you can't go anywhere. It's funny because and as you see, they're getting ready. Now, these are some of the neighbors that Laura was talking about a minute ago. Who are now probably accustomed to seeing these kinds of things with the Jacobs living in their cul-de-sac for so many years. But yeah, there they are right there. It's funny. I mean, La Jollans are just like anybody else. The president's going to come
Go
down. We're
figure.
going to get out the cameras and we're going to enjoy this moment.
Absolutely. Well, and if you've ever lived in D.C., it's a more regular occurrence. Often you'll run into a crazy traffic jam. You'll be blocked. It's a punishment light. You're there for 10 minutes. And sometimes I lived in D.C. for a couple of years. You'll wake up and you're like, oh, the president, he's out and about. And so San Diego's getting a little taste of that today, of what it's like when the president is on the move in their town.
See, now I'm glad somebody brought their kids. I was going to point that out at the airport. I didn't see any children. And boy, if you ever want to bring your kids to something, that's what you want to do when the president shows up. And I think that's what they're doing now. Some of these folks bringing out, even the little ones, if they can get a glimpse of the president going by when they grow up, they can say, when I was a baby, President Obama drove right down my street.
Well, what you need is for mommy and daddy to get a picture of it so they can
Bingo.
say, look, there, I don't remember it, but there it is. You pointed out, the traffic hassles that happen with this for obvious reasons. Washington, it's a much more regular occurrence because he has to get around that city. But LA has seen the president visit many times, and the traffic is bad enough there already. And when the president's in town, it can be a real nightmare.
Well, we have crews all along the route, including the destination, to bring you complete coverage. Don't forget, you can watch much of it on the 10 News mobile app, which is free. And we're going to have much of it on 10news.com throughout the afternoon, and of course, complete coverage on 10 News at 5, 6, and 7 tonight. Meanwhile, thank you so much to Laura Fink for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.